Hey, we're back. We're live. It's 10 o'clock on a given Thursday. I'm Jay Fidell, and guess what? This is ThinkTech. And the other guess you have to make is who's the handsome guy on the other screen? That's Matthew James Bailey. He joins us from what, Colorado? Where are you?
Colorado.
Okay, fair enough. They have troubles in Colorado lately. Be careful when you go shopping, Matthew. Matthew was an author, and he wrote this book, Inventing World 3.0. And the tagline is Evolutionary Ethics as the Central Thought for Artificial Intelligence. That's a very central thought. And that's the central thought of our program today. He wrote a lot of other books too and articles. And if you Google Matthew James Bailey, you get a screen full of stuff. It'll take you an hour to read all that. But we're Matthew, is there anything you want to add to what I've said? Any rebuttal, for example?
Well, the only rebuttal I'm going to say, Jay, I wish I was wearing a shirt like yours.
When's your birthday, Matthew? Never mind.
Coming up, actually.
So today we want to talk about the intersection, if you will, of artificial intelligence, which you have written plenty about in terms of its possibility on civilization and on the earth and on everything we do. And COVID, because COVID is an existential threat that's out there. It's still out there, and it's probably going to be out there for some time in one degree of lethality or another. And then when it's finished, we'll have another virus. And so we should really take this opportunity to address it in every way. And I am not sure that we have. I am not sure that we've used the technology available to us, including AI, to deal with COVID. What are your thoughts about that? Have we used AI sufficiently, to express our technology on this existential threat?
Well, that's a big question, and we've only got half an hour. Well, the first thing is, Jay, is that what we've seen, governments doing their best and innovation doing their best to respond in human-centric systems. When we have AI as part of our society, then it operates at lightning speed, able to detect the virus very quickly, it will have nurtured every single person well, the immune systems, good mental, good exercise, got us into good shape. And what AI would have done is to kind of get us into kind of a pandemic resilience in our human body, and also would have detected it earlier within society, which are the places it needs down. How does it put a digital barrier to stop it spreading? How can it protect the barriers of our states, of our actual national security barriers as well, to stop the invasion of pandemics? How can AI beyond the borders of the US for other pandemic threats and ensure that its border control is really, really robust? So AI can make a tremendous difference because, Jay, we're probably going to have another pandemic. The variants may cause another pandemic. We don't know how good these vaccines are. They kind of look quite good, don't stats say they're going to be good, but we could have another pandemic. So what are we doing to actually use AI to create pandemic resilience where we protect more lives, our healthcare systems actually work and are effective at the personal level, and where basically we'll be able to kind of throttle it at its throat so it doesn't cause economic catastrophe, which is what the US has gone through.
Mhm. A few days ago, we had a show on some of the remarkable Israeli technology. And the one of them that sticks in my brain is this one. It can detect from lung cancer from breath. So how do you do that? And it reminds me of the fact that we have heard over the years that dogs can smell disease, and they can identify all kinds of disease from what the smell is. And so this is it's not miraculous. It's just biochemistry, and that's what the Israelis are doing. It's something like that. So my rudimentary understanding of AI, I would guess this that what they're doing is they're examining the gases in your breath, and they're comparing the combination of gases against a million possible profiles of gas,
Yeah,
and you're using AI to flip through all those profiles instantaneously against the
yeah,
millions of profiles. And they're finding a profile that matches the profile they got from somebody who had cancer. This is not really, ridiculous. This is happening. And
yeah.
so
That's
you say, let's look at COVID, for example. We went through all this with the testing and the swabs. We never really did get a blood test that I know of that was reliable, and so it was really kind of a humbug to do all this testing. Well, if you used AI to test body fluids, breath, probably breath is a better one because COVID, is aerosol and it lives in the nose and the lungs. Um, they could have used the same kind of technique with AI to test for COVID and have it instantaneous. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what they would have done is used machine learning, either neural nets or just machine learning, or maybe deep learning, where they would have taken all those millions and millions of data sets you talked about, Jay, that are actually profiles, and then train the AI to learn about what is a condition they're looking for and what conditions they're not looking for. And this is where AI can create a tremendous impact. And if we'd have deployed that to our borders, if we'd have deployed that within our state borders, if we'd have deployed that, Jay, and made it accessible to every single person, then we probably would have reduced this pandemic impact significantly. And maybe variants would never have got into the US.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's look at another possibility, and that is, we've had a terrible time, in doing testing and tracing. Terrible time. In fact, in Hawaii, we had a scandal over it. People lost their jobs over it. I mean, senior health officials, like the, what do you call it, the fellow who runs the Department of Health, and his epidemiologist. They were really criticized for the testing program they didn't do. I'm not even sure today, Matthew, whether we have a working testing program.
Well, I
But
don't.
it seems to me that AI could have helped.
Well, absolutely. I don't think any country's done a decent testing program. Although, in Scotland, when the variant landed, they detected it within literally half an hour and locked down an entire community of 300 people and ensured they were all locked down. And that was, well, it wasn't particularly AI, Jay, but it was actually just practical testing of temperature and doing swabs and things like that. But AI could have changed everything. And the question is, Jay, why have we invested in AI for the well-being of our society and for the well-being of our peoples? Why have we invested in billions of dollars in social media that really doesn't create any beneficial impact to our personal lives? And so what we're seeing is a reflection of the industrial mindset, Jay, where it's all about the money and not about the well-being of the society. And that's what we need going forward, I think.
Well, digressing on that point for a moment, yes, theoretically, and yes, you have many, humanitarian concepts in here that could improve the world, and I'm sure we'll find a few in this show about the intersection with COVID. But you know, the assumption there is there's a way to use existing governmental structures, including leadership selection, leadership responsibility, to cause our leaders to take affirmative action. And I think that's one of the great failures that we see in our time, that they are they're uncharted. They don't have the compass to find a way. They don't have the responsibility to find a way, and they don't do anything. I totally agree. If you take this whole idea and you move back to, say, February, March, even January of 2020, and somebody really put his head on it and forced government agencies to put their heads on it, we wouldn't have had the pandemic.
Well, that's exactly right. And here's one of the good things: AI is better at logic and reasoning than humans by a long way. Can't feel love or compassion or the multidimensional aspect of humans, but logic and reasoning is brilliant. And what I suspect, Jay, over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see AI looking at democracy and our political processes and suggesting improvement. Because it's clear that our process, Jay, even though they're trying to do their best, is sluggish and ineffective. How long did it take for the latest stimulus check to get through all the politics? Um, so I think AI, because of its logic and reasoning, probably will start to rewrite political landscape and decision making as we know it.
Yeah, you and I talked in our earliest show about how you could apply AI to law, at least some parts of law,
Yeah.
how you could apply it to government and leadership, how you could apply it to finding things out, discovering, the demographics. Let's stop there and go back to the discussion of COVID specifically. So one of the big problems in the country, aside from the testing and tracing and all that, which really never ever got off the ground, which could have and should have, is this whole thing about um, the prediction analysis, finding where this thing was going, predicting where it would go next, based on public data. It's not a black box, and AI could have, and hopefully in the future will have, been able to predict the demographics and tell you that in the state of Michigan there are going to be X cases based on public data about the way it ramped up, with the way the contagion spread. You can point it somewhere with this predictive analysis. And that's AI, isn't it?
Predictive analysis isn't necessarily AI, uh, but AI can be used for predictive analysis. So, so AI could have, yeah, it could have created a tremendous difference. For example, it could have seen it that all these spring breaks, Jay, that are happening that have caused restarting of. It could have locked those down and prevented it. It could have stopped people from buying gas to get there. It could have basically stopped them from getting hotel rooms. It could have circumnavigated. But what AI could have done is said, look, what you need is some outdoors time. Instead of going to spring break, why don't you go here to this national park or go for a walk here or here? It would look at the real needs that we need as humans rather than actually looking at these social norms and just changing the social norms for short term in order for the virus to wipe itself out, and then we can go back to the social norms. So AI probably could have interfered and stopped some of these outbreaks from keep on occurring because of the way the students do spring breaks. And I'm not against spring breaks, but there's a maturity that's needed that the very survival of America's is at stake. And this is kind of like a war, Jay, and everybody has to do their bit for I was going to say queen and country, but you don't have a but it's
Maybe we
maturity.
should.
Well, yeah, maybe she'll come back. But my point is this: is that AI us to do better, quicker, and faster, and to kind of bypass a silly mindset that basically says, well, I should continue to do whatever I'm doing. Saying is, let's do something different because this is actually a national emergency, and I'll still look after you and guard your well-being, and maybe you'll learn a new gift like guitar or I don't know something else, right? Or go skiing. So my point is this: is that AI can guide us into pandemic resilience, but if we keep on fighting its ability to support us and help us, then we're only going to head towards disaster.
Yeah, I don't think we've been really clever about getting people to take the steps
Mm.
necessary to suppress the curve. And
Yeah.
by that, and this may sound draconian to you, Matthew, but and of course we're caught up in the Constitution. I
Mm.
have a constitutional right not to wear a mask, not to distance, and not to take a vaccine. That individual is helping to spread this contagion all around the country, and it's one of the reasons that we've had this pandemic. And of course, the other reason is that our President Trump, at the time, was encouraging people, to rely on that concept of constitutional rights, so they shouldn't participate in the solution. Now, if you go to China for a moment, just for a moment, they have this social score system. Okay? And if your social score is poor, if you haven't been following the rules, you don't have the same commercial rights. And this is problematic under our view of constitutional liberties and so forth. But in China, it works pretty well. If I don't follow the rules, I'm not going to be able to take a train. If I don't follow the rules, I'm not going to get a good job. If I don't follow the rules, My life is limited. So I tend to follow the rules. Now, with AI, you could do that. It's a social score, like a credit score, except it has
Yeah.
a real meaning, and you can do some things. And arguably, that's not a violation of the Constitution. What do you think about that idea as a way to implement the rules?
Well, I think, well, actually, Facebook is actually using the social score already, the way its algorithms work. So we're already under that anyway. Um, the problem is, Jay, is the trust paradigm between the general public in the US trusting the government and business. You know, Pew Research say 60% of Americans don't trust the government with their data and business with their data. We need better visibility. If government provided better visibility on how they're using their data and how they're using AI, people would start to retrust again. And when we retrust, we can fall into kind of experience you're talking about, where we all come together, we do the right thing, and then we all come out together. And this is, these are my thoughts on how we can kind of change the way we operate as a society.
Yeah. One other thing that has come up, fairly recently is Rochelle, Walensky, CDC, which that's a separate conversation. Maybe we have time for that. But she says a couple of days ago in the media, she says she feels like she has a feeling of doom. The people aren't following the rules, and they're gonna, you know, collectively create another surge. They are collective, the fourth surge. And she begs them. She literally begs them on national media, please wear a mask, even if you've had a vaccine. And I don't think that works with a lot of people that she intends it to reach. I don't think it works. But you know what? No one has said. No one from CDC has said, as far as I know, is if you don't wear a mask, it's not just you. If you don't follow the rules, it's not just you. It's your mother and your father and your kids and your brother and sister. It's everybody you have any contact with. So don't think of yourself. You can be a schmuck if you want. You can die if you want, but think of them. And there could be an AI scientific analysis saying to them, this is the impact on the people around you, and actually describe, from a demographic point of view, all the people you're going to affect and make them sick. This to me, you don't have to have what do you call it, anonymous information. You can deal on anonymous information, and that's ethical. I know you're heavily into AI ethics, and that's information that could be obtained, and that information could be analyzed, and maybe it would have a bigger effect than Rochelle Walensky begging people on TV. What do you think?
I think you're right. Now, I'm not allowed to go and see my mother and father in the United Kingdom until I take a vaccine, what I'll be doing next week. And because that's the right thing to do. It's not just my mother and father who are in their 80s I'm concerned about, even though they've taken the Pfizer vaccine, it's the other people on the plane. And so whilst I haven't got the virus, I have to be mindful that one, I don't want to catch it, and secondly, I don't want to give it to anybody else. And so this is really about us understanding we're a community. If there's one thing that COVID has given to us, which is obviously it's horrid what's happened, is we are part of a community, aren't we, Jay? That our actions do affect the lives of others. And this is a maturity that we need within society. We need to rediscover this community essence, I think.
Another issue, let me throw this at you too, Matthew. Another issue is whether these vaccines work with variants. And I'll tell you, the people I know, they're not certain. There's a confusion in the public mind on it. And of course, you get a little paranoid wondering about those things. And this opens the whole can of worms about how successful the vaccines are, really, and how most of the year that in which they were developed was spent doing testing, not developing the vaccine, but doing testing in all the phase 1, phase 2 trials, all that stuff. And it seems to me that that kind of approach, although it was better in this past year than it has been, it was quicker than it has been. Using AI, you could leverage that kind of testing and trial. You could take samples from a smaller population, maybe, or a better distributed population, and you can find out whether this vaccine works. You can find out whether it works with a variant a lot quicker. I think, just a guess now, but I'm interested in your thought. Um, I think that we're probably not using the best technology to test on the efficacy of these drugs against various viruses. And that if the CDC was using trial systems baked into the regulatory framework, mind you, for years and years, which it didn't have to do. And that if it used AI, it could have been much quicker.
Yeah, well, AI is probably already, we don't know, but AI is already being used in genetic engineering anyway, and genetics. They've probably used AI in terms of selection of their proteins and molecules associated with it. The I don't know whether all, but I think most of the vaccines are built on a platform that's being used for types of virus immunization. So it's a trusted platform. In terms of actually testing, we haven't finished the testing yet, Jay. There's a lot more to do. Now, what AI could have done, which I think your point is could have run multiple scenarios. It could have taken different aspects of human physiology. It could basically take types of social demographics, different types of aspects of our humanity and communities, modeled and give us some degree of confidence and guidance into how efficient a particular element of the vaccine is, and also to give us a good look in terms of which parts of society are really vulnerable. So AI could have done better. And the US could have invested in exascale computing, more supercomputing, quantum computing, that would have trained these AI algorithms much faster, Jay. Like a busy child, while you sleep and I sleep, AI is still learning. So what we're seeing here is that we need more investment in these AI technologies and the computing, Jay, in order to train this busy child so we can start to do well in pandemic resilience.
And you can do that without violating anybody's privacy. Am I right? Using a demographic approach of anonymous data. Am I right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, of course.
Okay, that's
Now,
of some concern. I mean, even with the testing that was it Apple and Google did, they did a cell phone thing. It was so careful not to violate anybody's privacy. And actually, I think by being so careful, they reduced the efficacy of the program. It's a crippled program because they had to cut it off here and cut it off there in favor of privacy. But
yeah,
I suggest that you can not violate privacy. You just have to use a lot of AI.
yeah, the contact tracing apps, actually, the privacy was stronger than the government. In fact, big tech did well in moving beyond current government policy around privacy of data, which was an incredible achievement. And what it reflects is that the government in its policy is too slow, it's ineffective. And so that needs to, and that's just symptomatic of a democracy, and things need to change, and that's fine. So the big tech did really well. The problem is, Jay, is that we don't know if it was possible to hijack those contract applications through malicious applications that were downloaded to an iPhone or to a Samsung phone or to an Android phone, right? Because there's always security flaws. But I would imagine that Apple would have done an excellent job on security. Now, if we'd have done this and everybody had it and were reassured that maybe their data would have been deleted after the pandemic, then we could have used all that data to train AI to detect pandemics at the point of origin, take better and quicker response, and therefore strangle the COVID virus at a particular point in the United States of America.
Brilliant. You don't have to keep the data once the machine has learned.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So let's move on to pandemics going forward. I mean, the great challenge of our time. We found vaccines. We don't know exactly how effective they are, but we found them, and we found some wonderful therapeutics. And I suggest that AI could have been helpful in the development of those therapeutics, and they're coming online now. What did I read? In Canada, British Columbia, they have a nasal spray that puts an end to COVID in 24 hours, 99% effective or thereabouts. This is quite remarkable in terms of dealing with the pandemic. stop it cold with, you know, therapeutics like that. I suggest, just as I suggested with the vaccine, you could do this more quickly, test in order to get governmental approval using AI on the test. You know, I'm reminded of the administration here in Hawaii, the state administration, state government using computers that are 30 years old. Is they're unsupported by the hardware or software manufacturers, and you know we're on a cliff with that. And when we replace the ones that fail, we replace them in silos, ad hoc. We don't replace the system. This is a problem because it perpetuates the ineffectiveness of what we have going. Government doesn't know how to do computers. Government doesn't know how to do AI. You agree?
No, I agree. And I think all governments do this. In fact, actually, in France, the parliament in France had to go, every single politician had to go through training on digital technologies in order to be informed in the debates within their government, which is a great thing to do. You see, AI, Jay, will in the future will be able to do the automatization of a vaccine faster than any human process. It will be able to do this. So what you'll have is effectively AI inventing a vaccine and running through all sorts of scenarios, going through check with a kind of a CDC AI. Together, they will come up with solutions that say, right, off you go. And this is what's coming. But unless we invest in supercomputing, exascale, and quantum computing, AI is running like it's crawling along like a slug.
Yeah. Yeah. But let me offer this thought. I mean, government has money, obviously. We can print money here in this country. It's quite amazing how we keep on printing it. But you know, we also have very big multinationals, which are in the tech field, which have you know billions and hundreds of in the bank all the time. They can afford to do
Yeah.
big projects. So one of the projects they could do is they could get on AI and they could make it work. And I think they probably are at some level. So the question I put to you is: in the future, as we have to use these systems, use all the lessons that we learned or retrospectively could have learned from this pandemic, who is going to be stepping forward? Is it going to be government, or is it going to be the likes of Microsoft and Apple and Google and you know all those? Because they have the resources, they understand it, and they have the platforms on which it can be created without a whole lot of regulatory interference. Who is going to do this going forward? Is it them?
Could be. It depends whether their mindset changes and how they view value they create in society. Is it about profit or people and profit? And so if their mindset changes, then they're fully equipped, Jay, to work with people like Moderna, Johnson& Johnson, Pfizer, to use computing technology and AI to significantly advance the field of genetics and vaccine research. They have the capability. The question is, will they? And so I believe that what we'll start to see is an emergence of the private sector that will start to take the lead on innovating these kinds of AIs that can help us to create pandemic resilience and well-being for the citizens, for our nation, and for our economies and societies to do well.
Yeah, lest we forget, we're not just talking about COVID. There are all kinds of threats and challenges, including climate change and dealing with climate change, that we have to solve going forward. And if we're smart about it, we'll put AI against all of those and make some real progress. It's the most important, am I right? It's the most important toolbox in our tool in our toolbox.
It is. I believe that AI can help us to combat challenges and leap beyond the challenges. And climate change is the greatest existential threat to all of our existence. And so I talk about environmental AI and how AI can solve the Paris Climate Accord agreements globally and also nationally and locally. We should be investing in what we consider value for humankind, which is the well-being of the people and the well-being of our environment. And economies will transform and probably do much better. I believe global GDP, Jay, will exponentially grow once we understand the purpose of why we're here on the planet.
Yeah, and being smart and being ethical all at the same time. Now, you know, what you say suggests to me, let me stop and ask. We have a question. Would AI help with vaccine passports? What do you think about that?
Well, vaccine passports is an expected innovation and an expected um, uh, kind of condition within society. And there's pros and cons to this. I think so can AI help? Yes, of course, and it should. It should make sure that it's monitoring our well-being. It's making sure that our immune system's doing well, the vaccine's doing well for us. So when we get on a plane, we can be confident that we're being okay in society and all the passengers too. It ensures that when we go to a destination, it's COVID free. If it's not COVID free, then basically it pulls us back and says, hey, you probably don't want to go there just yet. So we can certainly do this. My worry, Jay, around COVID and passports. What about those that can't take the vaccine because of genetic disorders? How do they then participate back in society? And so in the book, what I talk about is how AI can detect the safety of places and spaces and communities that people want to travel into and give them a red, amber, or green alert to say, yeah, you'll probably be okay. Definitely don't go, or yes, it's all clear. So I think vaccine passports make sense, but the problem is how do we cater for those that are unable to take the vaccine and those that are still queuing up for the vaccine, Jay, who are unable to travel to go and see loved ones? How many stories have we heard, Jay, of people that can't go and visit their families because of COVID restrictions?
Not only in the U.S. but worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, if we could lick the vaccine for X percent of people, sorry, lick the COVID, but for X percent of the people on the planet, then the others who are in some way limited, prohibited, genetically, whatever, by immune issues, what have you, those people will be a lot safer. So one way to deal with this is make everybody else take the vaccine, make everybody else follow the rules, and then the remainder, the rest of the herd, so to speak, the non-herd people, they will be safer. That's one way to look at it. But in the
Yeah,
end of the, go ahead.
yeah. I think that that's certainly one approach that is incredibly sensible. The question is, what do we do with these variants? None of us know really what that will do. Is it going to restart another pandemic? And hopefully, we've learned from this pandemic that we're still trying to recover. So I think your approach in terms of actually, this goes back to your point, Jay, community and well-being. If we're part of a community and those that take the vaccine, then why don't we take it in order to protect their lifestyles? And this is a sensible approach.
Yeah, and your point about having them live and be in a community that's safe, that is so easy to do with using AI or other database demographic programs. You could tell them that this city, this town, is the safest city and town in the country. So if you're looking for a place that's safe because you can't take the vaccine for some reason, that's where you go, and they go there, and that saves them, or at least it improves their chances. But I want to go to one other thing though, and that is this. I mean, we're hedging on this, and you talk about this in the book. By the way, this is on Amazon, right?
Yes, it is.
Uh, Inventing World 3.0: Evolutionary Ethics for Artificial Intelligence. It's not the only book. If you look up Matthew James Bailey, you'll find others too. Go ahead.
And briefly, the reason why I call it evolutionary ethics for artificial intelligence because it's an advancement of Darwin's theory around evolution ethics. And it's about how do we bring the digital world, data, artificial intelligence, and humanity together in a purpose and meaning to go into our future. It's an advancement of Darwinism.
Yes, and that goes to the question I was going to ask you. I will ask you now. You're really talking about a global process. This is not about the US, it's not about the UK, it's not about any one nationality. It's not even about any one continent. It's about everybody, everywhere. And one of the sad lessons that we have learned, over the past year, is that you really have to help your friend. You have to help your brother. Otherwise, they get sick and it comes back to you. How nice. So you have to look out for everyone. And that means, and my hats off to India. India has a pharmaceutical industry that can create a lot of vaccines. They are creating them for developing world countries, and they sell them or give them away cheap. And the result is they're really helping humanity. How about that? Are we doing that? I think we are selling to Mexico and we're selling to Canada, but I think there was a kind of trade deal involved in all of that with AMLO in Mexico anyway. And it's better to give them away because the benefit is so tremendous on the way back. So,
I agree.
so that means that AI can actually go beyond leveraging in the United States or even in the EU. AI can help the entire world. But how do you do that? Do you have people skilled in AI everywhere, like those French legislators? How do you make it ubiquitous?
Well, okay. I mean, that's a big, huge question. I will say that Russia have been giving the Sputnik one to Eastern Bloc countries, haven't they? Because there's been problems in the European Union in fighting. Um, so the question is, I think you're asking, and let's check in on this. Are you talking about AI as kind of a global guide for humanity? Are we talking about kind of a super intelligence that basically guides our systems? And I'm not ready to answer that conversation yet because that's just full of philosophical way in the future. But I
I'm
think
talking
that
about a third thing. Okay. When you
okay,
and I
what's that?
spoke earlier, we were dancing around this concept of you can use AI at any level. So if you
Yes,
solve a
yes,
problem in a small city or small town, that's good. Now you've proven you can do it. Then you go to the county level or the state level or the national level. And I think that applies even in remote areas. That the problem is specific to that remote area. You bring in AI and you have it learn what is going on there and solve that local or regional problem. So when I say ubiquitous, I mean the people out in uh, Tibet, that's really part of China anyway. The people in Mongolia, okay, they have their own specific issues. If we teach them, train them, make them appreciate AI, we could have a local version, so to speak, of AI, and that would help them solve the local problem. Is that the
yeah.
way you see it happening?
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes to AI honoring our cultures at the macro and also the community level and different types of spiritual traditions and different types of belief systems. Yes, absolutely, Jay. AI has to be personalized to culture. Otherwise, we're going to lose our culture completely. There's 5,000 languages in the world at the moment, and only half of those are being taught to children. We're about to lose 2,500. Our culture is being lost, and AI should us to honor cultures and to keep cultures going, advancing into the future. And so, yes, AI should be working at a local level, solving problems around the planet, food security, economic growth, education, you name it. It can work at a local level based on their principles, their beliefs, and their values, which may be different in Tibet than it is in Timbuktu, for example. And that's okay because AI is helping each culture to thrive based on their ethics, beliefs, and virtues. And that's the way it's going to go. Now, to your point, if when AI solves a problem to do with the pandemic, maybe in a community, well, then it can scale that intelligence to the other AIs around the United States of America and into other territories so they can circumnavigate that problem. And so it's sharing information in a collective mind, if you like, but we're not in Skynet, to actually assist all the cultures to not fall into the traps that particular aspects of humanity has fallen into.
Wow, what a great worldview. It's a call to action, too. We have to get on that road and soon. Matthew James Bailey, Inventing World 3.0, Evolutionary Ethics, a central word for artificial intelligence, the most powerful computer technology we ever had. Thank you so much, Matthew. We'll do this again, okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jay.
Aloha.